On this episode of Rock Down South, we chat with rock artist Jared Weeks from the band Saving Abel. Just the other week, he announced his return to the band after 8 long years away. We talk about the reasons why he left the band in the first place, what he did while away, and how he ended up returning to the band. We also talk about Saving Abel's brand new EP, Shade of Grace. We hope you all enjoy. Let's go. Welcome to another exciting episode of Rock Down South, a show where my friends and I chat with musical artists and ask them the questions we want to know about. On today's show, we sit down with Jared Weeks from the rock band Saving Abel. Most of you guys probably know their mega smash hit Addicted that came out in 2008 that was all over the rock radio stations as well as pop radio. They had tremendous success early on and put out 3 full-length albums and an EP before Jared left the band in 2013. We talk all about his departure, his recent return to the band, and what that means for their future. We also talk about Saving Abel's brand new EP titled Shade of Grace and discusses the impact the song Addicted had on the band. So without further ado, here's the interview. Jared, how you doing, man?
Hey, what's up? Thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much for coming on, man. I was really excited to interview you today.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
So first off, how good does it feel to be back in the band you helped start, Saving Abel?
It feels rather awesome, actually. It comes through many years. I've been gone almost 8 years, so a little 7.5 years, and been through a lot of things during those years, man. But what really feels good is getting back together with these guys, getting in the studio, and these songs just keep pouring out of us, just one song after another. And it's really good to revisit that passion and where we came from back in the day. It's like we didn't miss a beat, actually.
Man, I'm so glad to hear that. And I've been a fan of you guys for a little while. I was really big fans of those first 3 albums that you guys put out and listened to them when they came out. And even saw you play back in the day. I believe it was April 23rd, 2009, Lakewood Amphitheater here in Atlanta. I think you opened for Nickelback on their Dark Horse tour.
Yeah, absolutely. I was about to say, you've got the date down to the exact.
I had to look it up to make sure. I was like, what year was that?
Yeah, that was a good year, 2009.
Do you remember that show at all? Or was that kind of all blur?
I do remember that show because at that time, Atlanta was where I lived. So that was like a hometown show for me at that time. My wife and kid, everybody got to come and see me there. It was pretty great.
Man, that's awesome. So it was 8 years that you were away, and remind me why you left the band. Was it to pursue more family life at the time?
It was. That was a point in my life. Well, let's just be honest. This is part of my story here. I really didn't have the tools to live life at a capacity that we were at. We got really big, really fast, and it got to a point where I was using drugs and alcohol to get through the day, and that's just something that I didn't like doing anymore, living at a fast-paced life like that. I had to change who I was. And I'm really grateful for who I am. And I'm grateful for making that decisions those many years ago, because it's brought me to where I am now and who I am now, which I'm grateful for as well. And I'm actually Saving Abel this time.
So for the fans who might not know, what have you been doing for the last 8 years? I know that you've dabbled in some country music and some acoustic groups, but tell us a little bit more about that time away.
Yeah, I moved to Nashville right after the split because I was still working with the same producer, Skid Mills, that did all of Saving Abel's albums. So I just moved here and continued to work with him. And there for a while, he got me in with so many good writers here in Nashville. It's a whole different game here in Nashville, the whole writing game, man. I've been in rooms with some of the greatest songwriters that's in the industry today. I mean, some of them have 20 #1 hits, and it's just crazy to be in a room. Jonathan Singleton is one of the guys that I'm referring to down at 50 Egg Music. He does the Luke Combs and the Ray Fulchers and David Nail. He's got #1s. Like, I've known him for about 15 years. And so I started getting in the room with Jonathan, and before you know it, we'd done had a whole brand new country EP finished. And so Skid recorded it, and we did put it out. And I toured for a while off of that. I had a band called Jared Weeks and the band Criminals. I do solo shows. I also started working. I started a company with Jared Blake from season 1 of The Voice. He's an original gangster of The Voice. Who else is in that? Big Vinny is his name. Big Vinny was on season 12 of The Biggest Loser. He ended up losing 211 pounds on that show. That's me holding a fat cat.
Oh, wow.
So we ended up putting a company together called Nashville Cartel, and we do a lot of work with charities. We even go to prisons and hospitals. Right now, currently, we're doing dinner shows with Lee Brice and Randy Houser and Tracy Lawrence. We're getting those guys to come in and do a really small, intimate show with dinner where you sit at tables and not chairs. So it's a whole thing that we've been doing here in Murfreesboro and in Nashville. So Nashville Cartel opens up for these artists. But one of the greatest things that we do during those times is we raise money for whatever charity that we're pushing that night. So I remember one night we raised nearly $87,000 for the Boys and Girls Club in one night. So stuff like that is really what I'm pushing and what I've been doing throughout these years. Of course, good times, bad times, but it's really cool to be able to work with Nashville Cartel and these charities and be able to put good back in the world, because God knows we need more of that,
Oh, that's fantastic, man. Hopefully
Thanks,
when
brother.
I'm in Nashville next time, I'll be able to check that out.
Yeah. We usually do those shows quarterly. So every 2.5 months or so, we'll put together another show. And it's so great because it's right here in my backyard. I get to go play and sing and hang out with cool people and then come home and go to bed.
All right. So back to the most recent news. So what was the reason why you decided to come back after all these years?
Well, it was sort of a long story, short story, but it's one of those good kind of, it's like in a movie, where you've got the climax and then everything works out the way it's supposed to. When I left with Saving Abel, it was an amicable decision. And we sort of left things like, hey, if you ever want to come back, we'll talk about it and maybe we'll go from there. And thank God we did leave things like that. There was no hard feelings. There was no bad blood. It was just, like I said, it was something I had to do. I had to come and save my own self from who I was becoming, actually. So I've come a long way, thank God. But anyway, so probably about 8 months ago, I did a gig. I flew out to Phoenix, and I did a gig with Big Vinny and the Nashville Cartel out there. And on my way back, I opened up my guitar case when I got home, and my guitar had broken. So I called my guy, Tim Miller, who's my guitar guy, and I bring it all the way out to his house. So I drop it off with him for him to get fixed. So probably about a week later, I call him up and I'm like, hey, Tim, you still got my guitar? And he's like, dude, I'm on my way to Jason Knoll right now. I'm bringing his guitar. And I'm like, you've got Jason's guitar too? And he's like, yeah, man, I'm going to Skid Studio to bring it to. So that was kind of the first time that the universe started knocking. Now, with that being said, Saving Abel over the years has reached out and asked me to return a couple of times, but I had to turn it down because it just wasn't time to do anything like that at that point in my life. So anyways, I ended up calling Jason after that, and I was like, man, I hear Tim's got your guitar, and Jason and I have spoke over the years. We've always communicated back and forth. We still have a publishing company that we run together. So we're still, it was never bad blood, like I said. But anyways, I call him and he's like, yeah, Tim's got my guitar. And he's like, dude, do you ever think of that Shade of Grace stuff? So Shade of Grace, I'll stop right there and tell you, Shade of Grace was an acoustic band that Jason and I had before Saving Abel. Shade of Grace is where Jason and I figured out our formula. We figured out how to write songs. We learned, we vibed off each other. So that was our first band. It was just he and I, acoustic duo called Shade of Grace. And so, of course, I'm like, Jason, I think about that stuff. I go about that stuff all the time because it's just a good memory for nostalgia of me. Like I said, it's where I learned to write music. I remember the young man I was, as passionate and raw as I was then. So I go back to remember that, obviously when I need to. So it turns out that Jason, kind of felt the way I did about those songs. We always go back to them when we need them. So after that being said, I kept talking to him, on the phone, and And then I got on the phone with Skid, which is the producer, and he said, well, hey, why don't you just come over to the studio and we'll sit here and we'll listen to all these old Saving Abel songs that we never finished recording, all these old Saving Abel ideas that we never turned into songs, because Skid had hundreds of them. I mean, I've been with Skid 15 years or more, and he's got hundreds of ideas of songs, half songs written, some songs we didn't finish. So our whole idea was to sit in the studio and just kind of reminisce and be nostalgia and feel good about it and laugh. Well, obviously, you see what that turned into. We got in the studio. We got in the studio, and as far as these Shade of Gray songs, we ended up picking out 5 of the songs that we liked the best, and we ended up recording those in an acoustic studio type vibe. I got this idea from, Brent Smith and Zach Myers from Shinedown.
Smith and Myers.
Smith and Myers, and I have wore that CD out. Man, I've literally listened to that thing multiple times, sometimes multiple times a day.
I've seen them live. They're great.
Oh my gosh, I love those dudes, man. But after listening to that, and I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, we've got all these Shade of Gray songs. What else are we doing? We're in the middle of isolation. Like, what else do we got going? We've got this content. It's good. There is a place for it out there. Why not just record it and put it out there and see what's going on, So we got in the studio. We recorded those 5 tunes, ended up writing a new single called Whatever It Takes. And we actually just released that today. The Shade of Gray, Saving Abel, Shade of Grace 20-year songs. We just released that today. And we're already getting great feedback on it. It's #1 on a few playlists, and which is exactly what we're looking for.
That's fantastic, man. I was about to say, you got another big congratulations, which is that new 6-song EP, Shade of Grace, that you just dropped today. I gave it a listen, man. I listened to it probably 3 or 4 times through, and I really like it, man.
Thanks, dude. It's really low key. I mean, some of those songs are, 20 years old. So, I got to wonder in doing this, I'm like, are some of them going to be dated? Like, is this a good idea? All the doubts and fears, what's the worst that could happen? But to tell you the truth, man, all that stuff just completely faded out of my mind, because when I start listening to these songs again, it reminds me of, like I said earlier, who I was as a kid. And I can't be not excited about that. It's so good to revisit those feelings and get to hear these songs. And now everybody else gets to hear what I always get to go back to. So I just thought it was a good idea for us, now that, we announced that I'm the new / old lead singer. And now here's some music, so it's kind of helped with the momentum of things as well. I'm really glad to have this out.
That's fantastic, man. Yeah, I listened to EP. I like it. I think Wasted Time is my favorite song off the album.
Dude, it's so strange that you said that, because I've been reading comments all day, and that is one of them that's got the most comments. And to tell you the truth, I just didn't think that it was going to be that positive of a song for people. Like, it was almost my least favorite one on the EP, but it's just because I wrote that one by myself about something a very long time ago, and it was one of the ones that I thought was going to be dated. But I mean, so far I've been getting nothing but positive vibes about it, and so yeah, there's always a surprise of things like that. I'm pretty pleased with it.
So you guys started putting together these songs. And then when did you decide, hey, we're doing this thing, I'm back in the band?
Well, so as we start recording these acoustic songs, and everything is just smooth, going so well. It's going so smooth. We're having a great time. We're rediscovering where we left off. Everything's flowing naturally, and then so when we get done, we're like, okay, so what do we do now? So then we started listening to those hundreds of song ideas, old Saving Abel tunes, that some of them were never finished, and some of them we just didn't put out. So we started listening to those and just putting a check mark by the ones we liked. So, before we know it, we had a list of tunes that we wanted to relook at as a full band, electric guitar, drums, bass, everything. And as we started doing that, Jason's coming up with song ideas in his head. And it's almost like he and I had been saving all these tunes over the past 7 years. And now that we're together face to face, they're just kind of pouring out and all the dots are connecting. It's just so good to be back in the studio. I'm pretty ecstatic about that. But anyways, as the story goes on and we're listening to these tunes and Jason's writing new guitar riffs, and the melodies are just coming out so naturally. And then we end up writing what I think is going to be our first single off the new Saving Abel album that comes out in 2022. And it happened so quickly, but yet so naturally. And I'm pretty ecstatic that kind of formula that Jason and I had back in the day still exists when we're in the room with each other. And it just turned out, it became like a big boom. A light bulb went off in my head pretty soon after we wrote that first tune. And it just got to the point where after having a year, like, COVID isolation, I mean, that was a hard year. I mean, we couldn't leave the house. I mean, there was a lot going on. I mean, it was just an exhausting year. People lost their jobs. Some people couldn't survive. Like, we all came out of this different. But as for me, during the isolation, I sort of turned inward and started looking at myself on how I could be a better father, a better husband, a better musician, a better person in general. And I tell you what, it paid off. The consistencies of me doing that for myself, it brought the confidence back. And then getting in the studio with Jason and having that confidence and just feeling the vibe and creating what we've come up with so far. I just love it when the universe lines things up like that for you. And I just feel protected and I feel safe that everything that we're doing now is exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And I really feel like that it's got a good buzz and a momentum behind it, which is what we want. But most importantly, now that I'm 38 years old now, I'm not chasing the celebrity and the fame anymore. I just want to be able to pay my mortgage and take my kids on vacation, if that makes sense. But we're just in it for different things now, and it feels much more pure and more raw that way. And I haven't felt that way in a while, and I just can't wait to see where else and what else that it's going to end up.
Love hearing that. So glad you guys are back together. And my next question is, I want to take it back to 2008.
All right.
It seems like you guys exploded onto the rock scene with some really good tunes. And I was hearing Addicted everywhere in 2008, 2009. It was on rock stations, pop stations. What was that like?
It was almost unreal that Addicted was still going after we released it, and it was crossing all those charts. That was the most amazing ride ever. And it's still going, but for a young green, not knowing what's going on kid we went from riding in a van and sleeping in the floor of a van, being on tour by ourselves to being in a tour bus with Nickelback in a matter of months. So it was a lot, really quick, really fast, overwhelming. It was hard to keep up with, but it was one of the coolest things to be a part of. And it was just great to be out there doing that.
Yeah, man, I really enjoyed that time. And what I liked about the music back then is that it was well written, had great catchy songs, had a little hard rock, a little alternative, a little Southern rock or modern country influenced into it. And I think 18 Days could probably be a top 40 country song right now if it came out today, to tell you the truth.
That's so funny you're talking about that. I got a buddy, his name's Jesse Keith Whitley. His dad was what was his dad's name? Keith Whitley is his dad. Yeah, the country. I'm sorry. I was like, no, I didn't say his middle name. No, so Keith Whitley was his dad. So we all know who that was. He was, Hall of Famer type country singer back in the day. And I've just recently got together with him and we started talking about him covering 18 Days in a country version and just kind of like having me as a guest singer on it. And I thought that would be a pretty cool idea because it reminds me of like the Brantley Gilbert fans, the fans that are more along the lines of Saving Abel and the type of group that we appeal to. I just think it would be a pretty cool idea.
That would be a fantastic idea, man. I'd really like to hear that. I think that would work really, really well in the country scene, to tell you the truth.
That's what I love about living in Nashville. You never know who you're going to run into or who you're going to end up in the room with, writing a hit with or recording an awesome song with. It's pretty fun.
And next, I kind of want to talk about your voice because I really think it has a pretty comforting tone to it. Not too rock or heavy metal, not too pop, and really not too Southern and not too country. And each song, it really sounds like you're really going for it and given like a dynamic vocal performance.
I like for people to feel what I'm singing about. So I try to put a lot of motion into what I'm doing.
And not to mention the music is mixed where it's kind of like your vocals are extremely prominent on those tracks.
Yeah, Skids. I've heard Skid say that before, like where he likes to have my vocals cut through the room, even when the whole band's going. He's like, I want to hear your voice cut across the room. So that's what we call a skidism when the way those songs are recorded. That's our producer, and that's his magic that he adds to the formula.
Ah, that makes sense. And I really dig that style, how that those vocals are so prominent and so forward, and you got great songs that are written and you have really good strings behind them.
Yeah, that's all Skid there. He even on the second album, he ended up writing pieces of music for one of our songs. It was called "I'm Still Alive," and he got a symphony and an orchestra, and he wrote the music out for them to play. It's so cool and how smart this guy is. That's why he's a Grammy award-winning producer. I'm lucky to have him.
So he's responsible for that Saving Abel sound from back then. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. You hear what's out now, the Saving Abel Shade of Grace. You said you listened to that album. That's me and Jason. That's who Saving Abel was before we met Skid. Now, 18 Days was one of the songs that we wrote as Shade of Grace. Drowning Face Down was one of the songs we wrote as Shade of Grace that made it onto the first Saving Abel album. So Skid took that acoustic version of 18 Days and he created the whole band sound that you hear surrounded on the album. So that is because of Skid. Absolutely.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we got a lot of good songs. Addicted, Sex is Good, 18 Days, Drowning, New Tattoo, Stupid Girl, Contagious. I mean, those all came off 3 albums, and those are some really good songs. You got Mystify, which I know is on an EP.
Right.
I think my favorite underrated songs are Mississippi Moonshine and Michael Jackson's Jacket. I want to hear you play those songs live.
We are playing Mississippi Moonshine. I've already made the set list for the upcoming shows. So Mississippi Moonshine is one of my favorite songs to play. I really enjoy singing that song. And Michael Jackson's Jacket, that's the only song that I have on that album that's got my wife singing in it with me.
Oh, wow.
She's one of the background vocals in that tune. Yeah, that was a fun one to write too. That was really cool.
I want to see you guys play that one live. If you come through Atlanta, I want to see that one.
All right. I'll put it as a, you guys need to have this one in your back pocket just in case songs.
I think that's a really, really catchy song, man.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
And so you talked about putting a possible new album together. What kind of direction are you guys feeling or thinking for that album?
Well, do you know how Bringing Down the Giant has those really tight-knit guitar riffs, you know, almost like a Rage Against the Machine single note, Tom Morello, da 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 da, you know.
Yeah.
The most recent songs that we've written, we've kind of stuck to that rock formula. But to tell you the truth, that's just what's coming out right now, and we're just getting started. I think as time goes along, we're going to get more and more into our groove. I'm not really sure where we're going to land, but I do know how versatile we are. I do know we've got rock and roll and we can hang out with Avenged Sevenfold. And I do know we've got radio tunes and we can go tour with Matchbox 20. But that's just who Saving Abel is. I mean, we're just that band. And we've worked really hard for that. We've had a lot of good people surrounding us to keep us on that goal. But I think we're going to land somewhere in the middle between here and there. Rock and roll will always be a part of what I do. It's just who I am. You know, even trying to do the country album that I did in between Saving Abel, I kept telling Skid, you know, cut the distortion up more, cut the distortion up more, because you know how country songs sound nowadays. But I'll always be rock and roll. But you know, then again, I'm a '90s baby, so '90s pop radio is in my heart too. So, you know, I like the Goo Goo Dolls just as much as the next guy.
Well, very cool. So I know you sang for Hinder on a few shows. Were you ever considering making the jump to that band, or were they trying to court you for that band?
Yeah, I sang for those guys for about half a year, about 6 months. I had some time off with Saving Abel because my daughter was being born. So I had a couple of months off, and that's when Hinder called. And of course, I'm looking at my wife, and she's like, yes, go do it. We can use the financial, you know, we need that. So I ended up going over to Hinder, and we started doing the festival shows that they were headlining. And it turned out that they went so well that they ended up booking another tour around it where we went out with Dark New Day and Candlebox. And Candlebox is one of my favorite bands. So that was awesome. But it went so well that they built another entire tour that we got to go out on as Jared Weeks singing for Hinder. So it was really cool because a lot of the crew members were my friends, and it was so awesome to be able to go in a really professional camp like that and to be able to save people's jobs, keep them out on the road, keep them working. I felt really good about it, man. I got along with those guys really well. But yeah, they did ask me when I was leaving if I wanted the job. And at that point, I had not thought about quitting Saving Abel. So, of course, my answer was I can do both, because I had been doing it for a whole month there for a while. I made 20 different flights back and forth, Saving Abel and Hinder. But it turned out that Cody and the guys were looking for someone more along that if you can't do both, if you're going to get with us, we need your attention, and it would be hard to separate the two. So that's when they went out and got Nolan Neal, and they got rid of Nolan, and now Marshall Dutton, who's awesome, by the way, is the lead singer now. But yeah, that's sort of how the Hinder thing ended up. They're still some of my best friends to this day, and I really enjoy those guys.
I got an interesting question for you. I don't know if you've been asked this question before, but what is the worst show that you've ever played? Maybe it was a bad performance you did, a bad crowd, a small crowd, or maybe just a weird venue. But what kind of comes to mind?
I'll tell you, I don't even have to think about it. I know immediately. It was one of Saving Abel's first gig after getting signed by Capitol Records. And you know how I was talking must be in a van and trailer. Well, it was during the van and trailer time. And it was somewhere in Illinois, and it was a festival called the Wing Ding Festival. Wing Ding Festival. And there was probably 15 to 20,000 people there. So it was smaller, but yet big festival. And we get there early during the day. There's a couple of, bands going on before us. And I just, man, this is so funny. I just sat in the van and started drinking tequila because, back then when you're nervous it was the first time, one of the first times you're playing in front of that many people. This is still early in our career. So I started just shooting tequila. And, when you're that young, you don't think about the hangover the next day. But it turns out I ended up almost finishing that whole bottle before we went on. And I ended up getting up on stage completely. I shouldn't have been up there. But I forgot the lyrics to my songs. I tried to scream. I think like Drowning Pool went on before us. So I got up there and I tried to sing like Drowning Pool, like, whoa, it was completely horrible. My band walks off stage and then they had to take my hand and like pull me off stage. I think a lot of the bands that were there that day got video of it. So there's probably a secret video out there floating around somewhere. But out of all the embarrassment and as bad a show as that was, that day, at that point in our career, we had sold and made the most money at any point we'd made on tour through our merchandise that day. So all it took was me embarrassing myself for a while and people bought more merch. I just tell them it was a gimmick, but hey, it was very embarrassing. It's something that I'll never do again.
Oh, wow. That's quite a story, Jared.
Yeah.
Hey, Jared, when was the last time you wore your lip ring?
Oh, it's so funny. I was going through an old drawer that I had, like we just recently moved about a year ago. So we're still going through boxes. And I found a lip ring in one of the little cases that was in my box. And I secretly went and put the lip ring in. And then I walked in the kitchen to see if my wife would notice. And obviously she did because she told me that I can't do that anymore. I'm too old to do that. And I need to take it out right now. But obviously that was probably about 3 months ago. So it was not so far in the past.
Were you able to put it back in or had it grown over?
Yeah, no, it was a little tight, but the hole is still there and it still works. Like once I got the ring in, like you could tell it was tight and I eventually took it out, obviously, but yeah, it was still there. It still worked. Isn't that crazy? That's so crazy to me. That's bizarre.
That's wild, man. That's wild. All right. So these next 3 questions are what we close with and ask everyone.
All right.
So first question, what would you tell your 21-year-old self?
You can't make everybody happy. And if you try to, you're going to be miserable.
That's a good answer, man.
Well, it's exactly what I tell myself, I'm an emphatic. Like everybody else's are my feelings. I try to take them. So I would tell myself not to try to make everybody happy. Make yourself happy first.
Excellent advice. So next question. What are you drinking lately? And if you don't drink alcohol, it can be anything refreshing you like to drink.
I've been iced coffeeing it like crazy. I don't drink alcohol anymore, but I drank coffee, hot coffee in the morning for a while. But I've switched to iced coffee because it seems like if you drink iced coffee in the morning, it pretty much sets the tone for the rest of the day. It's going to be an iced coffee day. But during the morning, I'll get my hot coffee. And if my hot coffee isn't scalding hot, I'll stick it in the microwave and I crank it up more. So after my coffee goes cold in the morning, if I don't drink it fast enough, I just pour it right back into iced coffee and I have iced coffee the entire day. We've got a really good coffee maker here at our house and it's extremely good.
Oh, nice. And as you know, this is the Rock Down South podcast. So, what is something that you love about the South? Or a couple things. I know you guys are originally from Mississippi, right?
Right. So, one of the things I love about the South is the people. Just as an example, you walk into Kmart and you see the guy at the front door and he's like, "Hi, welcome to Kmart." You're like, "Hey man, how you doing?" And then just before you know it, you're in a conversation. 15 minutes later, you're like, "Oh yeah, I came here to shop." I'm like my dad. I make friends everywhere I go, but there are places like New York and LA, and this is only from my experience. Like I've been in New York and I've poured my heart out on stage and I've sang as loud as I could and tried to give them all of me. And sometimes they just like, "You want us to clap too?" Wait, what are you talking about? We showed up. That should be enough. But when I was singing with Hinder, I walked into this bar in New York City and I sat down next to this guy and he just looks over at me and he goes, "What do you want?" And I said, "I guess I'm here to get a beer." He goes, "A beer?" And I go, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "Yes, sir." And then he starts cussing me out. He's like, "You're not supposed to call me sir. You don't know that." So he ended up getting kicked out of the bar just because I said, "Yes, sir." Now, where I'm from, when you say yes, sir, it's a sign of respect. But I don't think he looked at it that way, which is why down in the South, I feel more at home and in my comfort zone. And I feel like I can get along and have friends everywhere. You get out of the South, the world's a little bigger to me.
Hey, thank you so much, Jared, for being a part of the podcast today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Where can people find and connect with you online? And what do you have in the works that people should know about?
We just put out the Saving Abel Shade of Grace 20-year songs today. Mid-October or early October, Saving Abel is putting out an Essentials album. Now, what an Essentials album is, we just got our rights back on all of our singles that we put out under the record label. So we got our rights back. Now we're digitally re-recording them, re-singing them, replaying them, and we're going to re-release them. But on that album, we'll also have 3 unreleased Saving Abel tunes. Now, these are some of the tunes I was talking about previously that were unfinished Saving Abel songs that we liked in the studio. And we ended up finishing these songs. They were never released, so we're going to release them. We'll have a single come out with that album too. So mid-October, Saving Abel's Essential album. We'll be touring the rest of the year off that. And then February of 2022 is the Saving Abel's new album will be dropping, which is what Jason and I are in the studio recording right now at this moment.
Excellent. And where can people connect with you guys online?
You can find us at The Saving Abel on Instagram, Saving Abel on Facebook, obviously. You can find me at The Jared Weeks on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all those good places. All our music is digitally on sale. It's streaming everywhere. Pandora, Apple Music, Amazon, Spotify, you name it. If you can type it, you'll find it.
Thank you so much for listening to the show today. Hope y'all enjoyed the episode. We had a really good time chatting with Jared. He's a super talented vocalist, and I'm just so glad he's back in Saving Abel. They were one of those bands that I listened to a bunch in college and just got hooked on because of the quality of their songs. Their music is really fun to listen to, and I cannot wait to see what they create in the future. Make sure to go follow Jared and Saving Abel on all of their social media pages and give their latest EP, Shades of Grace, a listen. Also, check out their website for their tour schedule, as they're constantly adding more and more shows and may be playing in a city near you. Check out all our content at rockdownsouth.com and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for the latest updates. And as always, the views and opinions expressed by our guests on the podcast are theirs and don't necessarily reflect our own. I'm Mark, and you've been listening to Rock Down South. See y'all next time.